Yes. Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, no problem. Okay, Westborough TV, good to go? Good evening. Welcome to the Westborough Advisory Board for February 24th. This is meeting number 25 of fiscal year 22. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, meetings conducted by hybrid means will be conducted in person and via remote access in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body may access these meetings in person or via remote means using the link previously published. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in this meeting may do so by accessing the meeting by in-person attendance. Additionally, meetings are broadcast in real time via Westborough TV, Verizon Channel 28 or Charter Channel 192, or on www.youtube.com/WestboroughTV. We have some guests this evening. First guest is Mr. Jim Robbins, who's the Director of Planning for Westborough. Did I get that right, Jim?
You did.
And he will be joined shortly by Mr. Mark Silverberg, who is the chair of the Planning Board. So, Jim, you have a presentation when you're ready. The folks at Westborough TV will help you get that. Okay, so anytime you're ready, sir, please. Thank you.
I'm going to take these in order. There are 4 planning board articles. The first one is not a zoning article. This one has to do with the master plan implementation. And as you know, in 2021, last year, we completed the town's master plan update. That study was conducted over a 2-year period, and we had a planning consultant, Ms. Hagen-Bruslin, VHB, out of Worcester, to complete the plan. The implementation portion of the plan obviously extends over many years, but in order to get the new committee going on what an implementation plan means, we sought some advice, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, from other communities and other consultants to see if it was really worthwhile hiring a consultant. So you can see from Article 12 we're asking for $16,000. I believe it's a transfer article for the purpose of this article. Assisting the implementation phase of the updated master plan, we want to fund the professional services to guide implementation of the town's master plan. The master plan was updated in 2021. The planning board now wants to hire a consultant to help with prioritizing and implementing the goals and objectives of the plan. So what's the purpose? The purpose of the consultant would be to assist the master plan implementation committee in confirming its mission, understanding its role and its responsibilities, and confirming the master plan's recommended actions. Preparing and presenting a master plan implementation tracking matrix. The implementation tracking matrix will be a database of all the recommended actions included in the master plan. And obviously the practicality of this tool is that it keeps the implementation plan on track and in terms of the tasks and the timelines. So what are the consulting services? The typical level of support from a planning consultant would be to attend and facilitate meetings on the early phase of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. They would prepare substance to be discussed at multiple monthly meetings. The deliverables would include meeting materials, including agendas and presentations, reports summarizing the long-term and short-term high-priority recommendations, implementation tracking matrix in Excel format for measuring progress. And this is important to the planning board, the tracking matrix, because we will share it online. So if you're staying at home and you want to know where the implementation plan is and how the town is doing and what actions we're recommending first, you will be able to see it online. So additional deliverables include identification of steps and connected actions needed to implement some of the key recommendations that are included in the master plan, identification of applicable regulatory framework and potential funding sources to execute the implementation plan, and the provision of case studies as available that could support the decision-making. That's my presentation. Oh, one last slide, but I already explained it.
Okay.
We consulted with our previous master plan consultant. We talked to the town of Northborough town planner and the chairman of the Northborough Master Plan Committee because they just completed their master plan a year ahead of us. So they're in the implementation phase now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any comments or questions from the committee members?
I have a question. Jim, what you mentioned this matrix talks about all the things that want to get done and when they want to get done. What determines the when part?
Say that last again.
What determines the when for each of these? Because I remember the plan sort of saying, you know, short term, long term, medium term, or something. But
Well, see, that's the primary goal of the consultant, to help the committee sort it out. Because as you know, the master plan had many chapters. We actually had 11 chapters in the master plan, 11 areas of focus that we looked at, everything ranging from housing to economic development, et cetera. And the members of those committees, of course, have ownership and attachment to their area of concern. The consultant is a third party who's going to help us sort that out and make recommendations based on what the plan says, what should go first. They basically, I don't want to say they're a referee, but they can be a referee. They can help keep us on track and not allow competing interests to rule the plan.
Hank?
Jim, the 16K, is that for 1 year of support or 5 years of support?
So it's for 1 year of support, and the intention is to teach the committee enough to be able to navigate after 1 year.
Does the committee have like an admin, or is it all just elected officials?
So-
You got yourself, right? So you've got some
Yeah, I'll be involved.
dedicated resource. Again, I mean, committees are great, but they have difficulty having continuity year to year to year. And you really, to follow this stuff up, you need some staff. Somebody's got some time to, and some requirement to do it. So I assume it'll fall to yourself after the first year to be the main driver of the.
Exactly. That's a really good point. So I probably should put that in one of the beginning slides, that the intention of this is not to have a consultant through the entire life of the implementation, because some of these are long-range plans that won't be dealt with in the first couple of years.
And some of us will remember when you guys come back with a little more money.
Good point.
Any other questions? Comments? Paul?
First, thanks, Jim and Mark, for coming to after huge negotiations, but just finding to come to a meeting. But my question is, is it likely, I don't know if this is a bid situation, or is it likely that this consultant will be the same one that was involved in the master plan, and would that help in efficiency?
Sure, that's a good question, too. We obviously would like continuity, and I know that we will have to go through a public bidding process. The consultant that we used will certainly bid on it, because they had a lot of advice and input to the planning board when we were discussing what we should do for implementation. The scope of the contract would be what we gleaned from their recommendations. So they probably would be the ones that would be awarded. They certainly have the background since they wrote the plan.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Andrew here. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting my hand to come up. And I'm sorry if I missed this, because I may have just not heard you as you explained it. How is the $16,000 figure arrived at?
Based on certain items that were in the projected scope of services, it's based on man-hours from the consultant. They have a pretty standard rate per hour based on the staff. So they would obligate, I didn't put this in my presentation because I wanted it to be short, but they would obligate 2 staff members at 5 meetings to begin, and then continue on a monthly basis or on a meeting basis, depending on how often the committee wants to meet.
And could you describe what you think the risk is of the 16,000 being insufficient or needing to come back for more, even if potentially just a little bit?
I don't think, well, I can never say anything certainly, so I'm not going to say that this is definite, but
Understood.
based on their scope of services and the people that they would dedicate to it, because they gave us way more information than what I'm showing here, I believe their estimate will be correct. It's based on a formula that they used with the master plan.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Can I
Beth?
just ask, thank you. Is there a minimum number of meetings or a minimum number of hours that they're going to dedicate within this contract? Or this expectation of what this $16,000 will buy?
So the budget, the total of $16,000, is for written materials to support the items that I talked about in the slides.
Yeah.
Plus 2 dedicated consultants for 5 meetings at 2 hours each. So
Is that
that's 10 hours
5
times 2, that's 20 hours of consulting time. And then they also promised to give us 2 follow-up meetings at 2 hours apiece as we needed it.
It's the as we needed it part that I'm concerned about. I mean, over the course of the year, how many meetings are they telling you is reasonable that they'll participate in?
7. If you look at their scope, they don't give a total number, but they break it down by 5 2-hour meetings and then 2 2-hour meetings follow-up.
So approximately 1 meeting every other month?
I'm sorry?
So does that translate to slightly front-heavy and then 1 meeting every other month?
I can't tell you what the time frame will be because the committee will decide when they meet.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Melanie, anything? No. Okay, thanks for that one, Jim.
Okay, I'll move to the next one.
Moving on.
There we go. Thank you. So this is a short article. I'll cut right to the chase. We found recently, when we were looking at a proposed project, outdoor recreation project that's going to be proposed by the Recreation Committee, that outdoor recreational uses are very restricted in this town. They're allowed at any property that's owned by the school or for any use associated with the school. But if they're not associated with the school, but they're on town property, they're not allowed. And I don't know what the reason for that is. It predates me, but it's been hanging around in our zoning table for years. The same criteria exists for cemeteries, which is another odd requirement since the town owns multiple cemeteries, including a new one on Nurse Street. So the purpose of this article is to create an amendment to allow outdoor recreation in cemeteries in M, the state, and MDC and municipal district, and the M1 district for town-owned property. There are public recreational uses currently on municipal land, and under present zoning, these are considered non-conforming uses. Any new public recreational use proposed on municipal land would not be allowed under present zoning. An amendment to section 2300 allowing these uses is needed. And the same goes for cemeteries, for the exact same reason as I just mentioned. So here's our current section 2300 regulating open uses. On this wall that I'm looking at, it's quite large. I don't know how large it is on the monitor that you're looking at, but you can see.
It's in the article as well. So.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So you can see that for cemeteries, there's currently an N in both the M in the M1 column. That means no, not allowed. We are proposing to change that to a yes, and the same with outdoor recreation, other than the above, operated by a governmental agency. So if the town, say, did something out at the town beach, or did something at one of their Little League fields, or one of their soccer fields that's not associated with the school, they need this change.
This implies that we've got a lot of existing non-conforming uses, right?
Does. Most of the fields in town predate the zoning. This zoning table was created in the 80s.
Okay, so, but something like the pickleball courts at Chauncey Lake and the tennis courts at Veterans Park are essentially non-conforming uses.
Correct.
And they'll now become conforming uses.
Correct.
Okay. Seems to make sense to make the change.
Any other questions? Andrew, got your handset going?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I'm all set.
Okay.
I was going to ask about arresting people at the pickleball courts because they're non-conforming, but that's not a good joke. That's not a good question.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, I do have a question.
Will the select board still have site plan review, or the planning board still have site plan review?
Planning board would still have site plan review,
Okay,
and the board of selectmen would still have a review and make a recommendation to the site plan.
great, super. That means
Fine.
there's
Beth?
still some control.
Okay, sorry, Hank, are you done?
Go ahead, Beth.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering, what kinds of recreation uses are allowed, or I don't want to use the word encouraged, but I'm thinking encouraged, at cemeteries?
They're not. These are two separate items in the use table.
Okay, so thank you, that was something that confused me. So what is it you're trying to get changed in the cemetery?
So currently, cemeteries are non-conforming uses on town property. If they're on private property, like associated with a church, then they're allowed. But if they're in municipal property only, then currently they're non-conforming use.
You mean, in other words, we're mandated to have cemeteries, that's why we're building the big one, but we don't have permission to have them?
Not on town-owned property.
Didn't we just agree to fund a huge town-owned cemetery? Last year, the one?
2 years ago.
right- Yeah, so that's that's like a special exception or something?
Right now, that's considered a non-conforming use.
Okay. And so the goal of this change is to make it a conforming use because that's what the town decided to do. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Beth, until now, they would have had to gone to ZBA to get
The
get a
variance?
permit, yeah, basically a variance on any of these uses. So even the soccer fields at the state hospital, when we bought that, technically they came non-conforming. I don't know that they ever got a special permit. And I'm sure a lot of these never got special permits.
That's right.
So now the goal is to just make it a
It's just-
more straightforward, this is what their purpose is,
Detail.
and we're allowing it?
Right.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, moving on, Jim.
Thank you. Now we get to a couple articles that should raise some money for the town. Good thing. If I can get my mouse to work, it's a good thing.
Here she is. She's in.
So this is Article 3 in your warrant. It's a zoning article, and it has to do with creating a new zoning district for industrial uses. We call it the Industrial E, or the IE Overlay District. It's on the west side of town. So the area description and the purpose: the Industrial E Overlay District would encompass properties on the west side of town along Otis Street, Secaucus Drive, Valenti Drive, and Smithville Parkway as an overlay to the current general industrial B district. This area is currently a series of industrial and commercial uses encompassed by the general industrial district. The purpose of the amendment is to create more opportunities for commercial uses in the long term, such as professional office, research and development uses, and technology uses. The IE overlay district would allow increased land use intensity through increased dimensional standards more permissive than those provided by the underlying IB district. So what's proposed? A new zoning overlay district known as Industrial E. The uses would be allowed by right. Same uses as are currently allowed in the Industrial B, so everything that's allowed out there right now would still be the same. The only difference is we're allowing 5 stories by right. Currently, 4 stories are allowed by right. We would be requiring a minimum of 50% open space. Currently, 60% minimum is required. Site plan review by the planning board, just like currently, any use in that district currently requires site plan review. The provisions for the district, the current general industrial district remains in place. The new industrial E overlay district would allow additional privileges. Though uses in the new IE overlay would be allowed to increase coverage and increase building height privileges, provisions are made to protect the environment and the surrounding neighborhood. So what are those provisions? The project design must maximize opportunities for walking and bicycling, incorporate best practices in energy efficient design, environmental protection, stormwater management, LEED, which is leadership in energy and environmental design, and low impact development techniques wherever practicable. Must retain existing mature vegetation wherever possible, provide for winding sidewalks and creative siting of structures, assure that landscape materials used as buffers are native, non-invasive, hardy for New England weather conditions, and disease resistant. They must provide for electric vehicle charging stations serving parking facilities, and your warrant article says at least 5% of the parking. They must assure that the project site design provides for a photovoltaic, which is solar energy, and other on-site renewable energy generation readiness. If a property in the IE overlay district is within 300 feet of a residential use, any development of the IE parcels shall screen residential abutters from any light and sound coming from the parcel in the IE district. Such screening shall be achieved by eliminating lighting on the side of the proposed development facing the abutting residential use, adding landscaping, fencing, or other visual or sound buffers. So this is a copy of our current zoning map. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we're talking about the west side of town. It doesn't look like my cursor's showing up here. So I'm going to zoom in on that. Okay, so you may have noticed a little bit of a change, and the next slide is going to show it close up. So we're talking about Otis Street, running north to south on the map, Smith Parkway, down at the bottom, where the MBTA station is in green, Secaucus Drive, which is a short cul-de-sac on the eastern side of Otis Street, where Coca-Cola is, and Valenti Drive, which is up on top of Boston Hill, where the YMCA is. So those parcels which are in purple and then have a colored cross hatch are the properties involved. And while you're looking at the map, we talked about protecting residential abutters. So you'll note that there are some purple properties, and that's the underlying IB district, that are adjacent or back up to residential properties on Assabet Drive, Fisher Street, and those that front on Fisher Street and back up to the railroad. Those properties would not be part of this overlay, excepting one property, which is number 10 Otis Street, which is currently occupied by Columbia Tech. That property would be subject to any residential buffering protection. All of the other properties do not touch or abut any residential uses. They're all currently industrial. So for these properties, we're proposing to allow buildings to be at 5 stories or 85 feet, and to cover the parcel to 50% instead of only at 40%. So what are the IE's benefits? It provides more opportunities to meet the desires of today's modern office and R&D companies. It improves Westborough's attractiveness when competing with other towns for business, helps boost Westborough's tax base, helps to reduce the burden on residential taxpayer, and provides provision for uses of renewable energy sources and protections for surrounding neighborhood uses. Thank you.
Questions? Yep. Hank?
Jim, has the fire department weighed in on the five-story adjustment? Are they comfortable that they can handle the?
They have. We reached out to them first. They have to be able to get their apparatus to the building.
Right, good. Second question, I noticed the M zone properties are excluded. Was that a deliberate exclusion or just that M has its own zoning?
Oh, yeah, I'll go back to that just so you can see. So you're talking about the MBTA whoops, I went too far. I went too far.
The M zone, it's basically, most of it appears to me to be the Hokomoko Pond property or whatever.
Yeah, we stayed away from any town-owned property. The town property that's out there is either the water treatment plant, which looks like the lollipop or the balloon at the top there, and then Hokomaka Pond, of course, on Smith Parkway. Hokomaka Pond still has some environmental issues, and the town decided they wanted to use it for recreation.
Okay,
I have a question.
Thank you.
okay,
Ask a question. real
yeah,
quick.
Melanie?
When you reference the walking and bicycling trails, or however you're gonna do it, the maintenance will be by DPW?
So
Who would maintain?
if there is a bike trail on private property, like, for example, we did an Otis Street corridor study, some of you may be aware of that, and we want to create a multi-use path along Otis Street. If it's in town land, yes, we would maintain it, the town would maintain it. If it's on private property, the abutter would have to maintain it.
Okay, we've got Andrew, Beth, and Paul. Was your hand up? Okay. Andrew, go ahead, and then Beth.
Thank you. If this new type of IE designation is such a wizard good idea, why don't we just update all of our IE and then grandfather people in, so the existing properties that are non-conforming, and just require them to upgrade to these spiffy new standards, as they update in the future?
That's a good question. So the whole purpose of expanding the opportunity for increased intensity on these parcels came about because several years ago, the town increased the zoning density of our IB district on the east side of town. So if you look at our zoning map, you see a lot of purple on the east side of town, up by the intersection of Route 9 and 495. They already have this zoning and actually have more privileges. They're at 6 stories and 40% open space instead of 50. But the reason we didn't just simply adopt that zoning on the west side of town is because the west side of town has a lot of residential uses, and our water treatment plant is there, and we have 2 municipal wells there. So we wanted to provide more opportunity for business development, but be careful and sensitive to our environmental resources. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure that addressed your question.
No, it does. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Beth?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I have 2 sort of mathy numerical type, how do these numbers get picked questions. Because obviously, from my perspective, I like the 60% open space over 50%. And how much of a difference does that make to potential businesses? Because I'd like to see it stay more open space. I don't mind the buildings getting taller and and being more compact. And the other concern I have has to do with the allotment that you basically are saying there needs to be 1 in 20 spaces need to have electric facilities for them, for plugins. And I'm wondering if that's enough, and if we can do something that's tiered so that as society becomes more need to plug in, we can, say that in 5 years, that will need to be up to 10% or, because as a community, we have a goal to increase our electric vehicles. And I don't want to be like, well, 20 years ago when we didn't need them, we said 1 in 20 was fine, and now, we're short.
Those are both really good questions. So Beth, I'll take the second one first. The 5% EV or electrical vehicle charging stations is a number that we picked because currently the Universal Building Code does not require any electrical vehicle charging. However, the building code is being rewritten, and in the next year or two, in the very near future, there's going to be a requirement, and it'll probably be higher than 5%. So currently, we're ahead of the curve, but when the Universal Building Code comes in, we'll have to comply with that. So if in a couple years, they have to provide 10% or 15% or whatever that number is, that's what they'll have to provide. But until that comes in, we're starting at 5%. We have a couple uses in town, and one of them is the Amazon robotics facility. They're currently above 5% of their own will, because they were not required to do this. And the new Amazon facility that's going to be built at 4400 Computer Drive is going to have all of their delivery van parking area serviced 100% by EV-ready charging, because they intend their vans, their entire fleet in 5 years, to be 100% electric. So
Awesome.
until the time comes that the Universal Building Code changes, this is our start. Your first question was protecting the environment and why give up the additional 10% of open space. So the underlying district, the IB district, is still allowed by right, and they do not have to provide all of the environmental protection measures that are kind of the stick for the carrot, which is the increased development. So if a company doesn't want to do solar power, EV charging stations, or provide additional sidewalks and biking paths, they can develop using the underlying zoning, the IB, but in that case, they can only cover 40%. They have to keep 60% open space and only 4 stories. So it really is a carrot and stick approach. If they want to develop further, they've got to be more environmentally sensitive. If they don't want to have to do the environmental protection provisions, then they're going to provide 60% open space.
Can I have a follow-up question, please? When this Universal Building Code comes into play, are the people that put up their 5% electrical vehicle charging stations going to be grandfathered in, or will they have to somehow comply, or are there triggers that would make them have to comply with the new code?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Traditionally or historically, buildings that are built under a previous building code are not required to upgrade, but I don't know what's going to happen with the new building code.
Okay, so that would be a concern for me. I mean, if we could somehow put in, and to comply with building code as it evolves into the, I would be happier. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
Silverberg?
So, when we first started talking about this, we talked with several landowners in this district that are going to be affected by this. And, some of the feedback we got was, well, we can't build up, but if we wanted to put an addition on, relaxing the open space standards would allow us possibly to expand in our current location rather than moving somewhere else, which is, we're not psyched about businesses leaving town. So that was a factor for us. How could we allow people to expand? But we wanted something back for that. We wanted some environmental, sustainable practices in these buildings to offset the open space impact. And I hope you understand I'm a huge supporter of open space issues in town. So I don't take that lightly, but, I do want to enable these landowners to potentially make their property more valuable. And I think the sustainable practices, I would love to see those become part of the base zoning. But if we were to take that step now, we would be probably at a competitive disadvantage because other towns wouldn't require that in their underlying zoning. And that might have the opposite effect of what we're trying to accomplish. I hope that makes sense.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, moving on to Article 34.
Okay, this is unfortunately the longest article. So this article is about updating our sign bylaw, dealing specifically with off-premises signs, and it mostly deals with digital billboards. The purpose of the amendment is to make provision for off-premises signs, including digital billboards, along interstate highways that pass within the town of Westborough, while regulating their location, size, and intensity. The purpose is to responsibly address the changing technology of digital displays and the town's desire to regulate this technology. To allow new sign technologies in a designated area through special permit process. To regulate the quality, scale, and impact of off-premises commercial billboards with the purpose to maintain both a competitive business market and an aesthetically attractive residential community. To encourage the siting of commercial billboards and electronic digital billboards in locations that will not cause driver distraction, but can provide public service announcements in emergency situations for safety and welfare of the general public. To preserve the residential character of the town and to protect the environment, historic, and open space resources of the community by designating areas of locations that minimize potential adverse impacts to the town. So what are the locational regulations? The allowance of off-premises signs, including digital billboards along I-495 and the Mass Turnpike, I-90, allowed only by special permit from the Board of Appeals and a development agreement with the Select Board. Off-premises digital billboards may be allowed on commercial or industrially zoned, specifically including the exclusive industrial, the general industrial, the mixed-use industrial, the industrial D overlay, in the highway business district. Any property that shall directly abut Interstate 90 and the Massachusetts Turnpike or Interstate 495. Any installation of an off-premises billboard shall require special permit from the Special Permit Granting Authority, and an off-premises billboard development agreement with the Westborough Select Board. The Board of Appeals shall be the Special Permit Granting Authority. An off-premises billboard shall mean an off-premises sign utilizing digital message technology capable of changing the static message or copy on the sign electronically. A digital billboard may be internally or externally illuminated. Digital billboards may contain static message only and shall not have animation, movement, or the appearance of an optical illusion of movement of any part of the sign structure. Each static message shall not include flashing or variable light intensity. Existing off-premises non-digital or non-electronic billboards in other districts wishing to convert to digital shall comply with these requirements. So the special permit criteria by the Zoning Board of Appeals shall show that nuisance or hazard or congestion shall not be created. No residentially zoned property or pre-existing non-conforming property or other property used for residential purposes, excluding hotels or motels, is within 500 feet of 500-foot radius of the proposed location. Any proposed sign shall not adversely interfere with the use of adjacent properties, including but not limited to increasing noise or vibration, casting a shadow on, or causing a flicker on adjacent properties. Any proposed billboard shall not be permitted within 1,250 feet of another permitted off-premises digital billboard sign on the same side of the traveled way, regardless of which direction the sign is intended to face, and shall not be permitted within 1,250 feet of another permitted off-premises digital sign on the opposite side of the traveled way, regardless which direction the sign is intended to face. Off-premises digital billboards shall be in harmony with the surrounding area and not do significant damage to the visual environment. In making the determination, the Special Permit Granting Authority may consider, among other factors, the physical, environmental, cultural, historic, or architectural characteristic of the location and area, the proximity of the proposed billboard to schools or places of worship or open space, architectural characteristics of the locational area, the structure, height, and size of the sign, and the number of signs on the premises in the area where the billboard is to be located. There shall be no flashing light. No sexually oriented or sexually provocative or adult businesses as defined in the town zoning bylaws shall be advertised on a billboard. There shall be no advertising of marijuana-related products as defined and regulated in the town zoning bylaws. The Westborough Select Board and the owner and operator of the off-premises digital billboard shall mutually agree on a schedule to which the billboard may advertise town-sponsored events, or other public service announcements. So now this is specifically about the agreement with the Select Board. Components of the off-premises digital billboard agreement with the Westborough Select Board. The off-premises billboard shall be permitted if the Select Board determines that the billboard serves to provide a public benefit to the town. The Select Board and the owner or the operator of the off-premises digital billboard shall utilize the off-premises digital billboard for emergency, public service, and safety announcements, including but not limited to those associated with law enforcement, emergency management authorities, regional emergency information important to the traveling public, including but not limited to Amber Alerts, emergency management information, or public service announcements. The Select Board shall determine any local fees or terms associated with the billboard's operation. So now here's our zoning map again. And again, my mouse won't work on that. But if you look to the east side of town, would be on your right-hand side. The purple area is once again the intersection of Route 9 and 495. And down at the very bottom of that area where 495 kind of disappears in the south, the Massachusetts Turnpike comes in. So we're talking about the area along 495 and the Massachusetts Turnpike, not Route 9. Route 9 is not included. This shows the properties that directly abut either 495, which runs left to right in this picture, or the Massachusetts Turnpike, which runs top to bottom in this picture. The parcels on the lower portion of the screen that are crosshatched directly abut residential uses. So given the locations of the properties and their proximity to residential uses, you can imagine how limited this area would be. So we decided we would do a projection using our digital methods and our GIS technology in town. And we had to use the one sign that exists at the bottom of the frame on the right-hand side on the Massachusetts Turnpike, because that's an existing digital billboard on the Mass Pike on the Cumberland Farms property. That becomes the control. All other sites would have to consider the setbacks from that sign. The inner blue ring is 500 feet, so any residential property within 500 feet would exempt the sign. The outer ring, the yellow ring, is 1,000 feet from the sign's center or location. So again, using the Cumberland Farms sign and moving down the Mass Pike to the left-hand side, there's a possibility on one property where a sign could go. Then, because, again, like the bylaw says, you have to have 1,000-foot separation, regardless of what side of the street is on, all of the other properties, in light of the residential presence, would not be eligible on the east side of 495 or the right side of your screen. There's a possibility for 2 more signs on the west side of 495, which is 495 southbound. So the most that you would get under this bylaw is 4 signs, and one of them already exists. Of course, where the first sign goes would determine where other signs could go. So they don't have to choose these 3 locations. The first sign could go anywhere, but that will further limit the number of signs. So the slide I'm showing you right now is a poll that we conducted. We conducted a survey online, And we got, as you can see, a total of 242 responses from the residents of Westborough. And the question we asked was, would you approve of additional billboard signs being installed only along Route 495 and/or the Mass Pike, so long as they were regulated by the town to provide proper spacing and are not visible from residential parcels? And as you can see here, the results were 65% yes and 36% no. So it was almost 2 to 1 in favor. The next slide asks a similar question, but it gives more weight to the town's authority. The question was, if you do not approve of electronic billboards, would you approve if the town received revenue from their operation, as well as the ability to utilize the billboards for public service messages solely related to the town? And the actual results are pretty similar, with about 1% more in the yes column. So what are possible benefits? The development agreement with the select board. Currently, there are 4 billboards on Route 9. There are actually 3 physical billboards. One of them has 2 sides, so we count that as 2 faces. Digital billboards currently pay $10,000 annually in fees per face. There are 4 faces, so that's $40,000 to the town annually. Billboards along I-495 and I-90 are likely to pay more. Digital billboards pay property tax depending on the size and location. Currently, billboards pay a total of $30,000 annually in taxes. The new digital billboards would provide public safety and public service announcements. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Walter?
So you talked about a 2-sided sign on Route 9.
Mm-hmm.
I missed it because it kind of went quick about you can't face this, but could any of those maximum possible 4 be a 2?
They'd probably all be 2-sided,
Yes.
but they have to face the interstate. They can't face back towards the residential neighborhood.
Right, but it could face north and south on
Correct.
495 or something.
And it would be 2 faces.
Okay. And does alcohol fit into that adult stuff? 'Cause I saw
Our
you,
zoning bylaws do not regulate alcohol.
so that's not considered an adult
Correct.
use?
The reason that adult entertainment and marijuana was mentioned is because our
adult
zoning
entertainment.
regulates those uses.
Got it.
Okay, Beth had her hand up. Beth?
I'm a little bit confused. Are we setting up a situation where, like, there's along that 490, along that stretch of the pike, that they're gonna be rushing to, like, in a bidding war with, I'll let you have it here, because, like, again, it sounds like there's a limited number that are gonna be allowed, and if you make arrangements early, then you get it, and somebody else doesn't, has that sort of looked at? We had
So
very
it-
limited liquor licenses when we first had the liquor licenses, and, they got sold at ridiculously high values. I'm gonna look at it.
I didn't hear all of that, Beth. The last couple sentences?
Sorry, you're coming in really garbled too, so I missed part of your presentation, although I was listening. Because there's only 4, it sounds like maximum allowed in this scheme based on your projections. Are landowners who could potentially post one of these signs gonna be in a bidding war for the right to have a sign? Like, are we creating a market for something that could be potentially very unfair?
So I hope you can hear me. If you can't, Beth, please tell me you can't hear me. There's an operator of the sign. The town does not operate the sign. So the town would not be taking bids to grant a permit. The operator of the signs on Route 9 and the one sign that exists on the Mass Pike currently is a company called Clear Channel. Clear Channel is the one that gets the permit, not the property owner. They pay the property owner for rent for their property so they can erect the sign. Clear Channel is totally in charge of what fee they pay.
What fee they pay for rent
Correct.
to the land. But are we setting up a bidding war amongst the potential landlords?
Okay, you mean the landlords would bid to Clear Channel? That's not the way it works. It works the other way around. Clear Channel goes to the property owner and makes them an offer.
Hank?
The conversions, this will allow conversions of existing billboards. Do they also require, does a conversion require a special permit?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Anyone else? Walter?
Let's see. Hold on. I had a question and I forgot.
I'll go back
Yeah,
to the
exactly.
slide that showed the locations. That seems to be the most questions. And this will be showed at town
Oh,
meeting.
Yes, I just wanted to verify, because the Pike goes through another part of our town, but since that's not in commercial at all, there can be none out in that,
Yes, so you're
Western
thinking about
side.
Spring Road, that area?
right.
Yeah, no,
So
they're all
nothing over
residential
there.
uses, and we're not going to allow it in a residential
No.
district.
Any other questions? Mr. Silverberg, any comments, or?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to address Beth's question. If you go back to that map.
Which one, Mark? This
the-
one or the
one
yellow
with the
map?
yellow, either one will show it. Yeah, that one. So if you see all those properties in yellow, almost all of them, with the exception of the crosshatched ones on the bottom, almost all of them would be eligible to apply for a sign. Now, yes, if somebody in the middle were the first to get a sign, it might limit somebody else from being able to put one up, but, you know, the alternative would be to allow, we had considered it one sign every 1,000 feet, and that could have produced a maximum of 11 signs, which just felt like too many. You know, I don't think anybody wants 11 of these signs going up. But, you know, the 4 signs would be really including the one that's already there. So you're really only looking at a potential for 3 more signs if they were spread out as much as they could be. But nobody's examined those sites to see if they have conservation issues or topography issues. So yes, we theoretically might only end up with 1 more sign out of this. It's possible. You know, and yet it gives all of those landowners a chance to negotiate with Clear Channel or another billboard company to try and put a sign up. It's not just for the benefit of one or two.
Was that helpful, Beth?
Yeah, that was helpful.
Okay. Anyone else? Guess what, Jim?
No, Andrew's got his hand up. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Very quickly, what do these changes in the rules mean for the billboards that are already in place, in terms of any need to make changes or what have you?
Sure, that's a great question, thank you. So any change to any of the current non-digital billboards, say on Route 9, they would have to comply with this proposed bylaw. So they'd have to get a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And one other thing that's a nuance of this, and it's in the written portion of the bylaw in your warrant, is that the billboard operator also has to get a permit from Massachusetts Department of Transportation, so Mass DOT, because Mass DOT owns the right-of-way, so they have to also grant a permit. And they have further restrictions that may further limit the number of billboards even that we project as a maximum, because their permit does not allow a billboard in an interchange, because they don't want to distract drivers as they're making the move to exit the highway, or as they're making the move to merge onto Route 9 or the Mass Pike or 495. So the interchange area that's shown on this yellow map, on the right-hand side of the map, Those parcels, even those that are shown in yellow, we show them as yellow because they touch the interstate highways, but they probably would not be eligible because DOT doesn't allow a billboard on their ramps or in their interchange. So I can't tell you what they would do in the permitting, but that is one of their rules.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and by the way, whatever you did to the voice has vastly improved our ability to understand what's happening in the room. So thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Mark?
I just wanted to comment too, that we, a conversion of an existing non-digital billboard to digital would not only require a special permit, but it would require a development agreement under this, so the town might gain added revenue, it would presumably increase the tax value of those billboards as well. I personally, I'm not a huge fan of billboards in general, but I think the digital ones are more aesthetically pleasing than the non-digital ones. And we did limit it so that they couldn't increase the size or height, or, we wouldn't get 75-foot high billboards on Route 9. They have to stay in the same size that the current non-digital billboard is.
Jim, are you getting any pushback from town residents on this article or on this proposal at all?
From residents, no. From the residents, no. I
Okay.
get many questions from the boards.
The boards?
Yeah, so they can understand this. They're residents, but they're, elected officials or appointed officials.
Okay. All right. What's some of the issues they've been raising?
Some of the issues are concern over First Amendment rights for advertising, concern over the impact to a residential abutter, concern over the aesthetic appeal of the right-of-way, whether it's 495 or the Mass Pike. One question that was raised is, will these all look like what's on the Pike right now, which is quite a large billboard, or will they look like some of the other billboards that we've seen elsewhere on the Mass Pike? And I don't know how many of you travel west, but there are two in Auburn, one on each east and west side by the Auburn Mall, and one is really high and the other one is rather small. And the one that's rather small is because it's on an existing billboard location. So those questions are I'm not able to answer those definitively because the regulation creates a maximum height and a maximum size. It doesn't create a minimum, and it also wouldn't tell me what an option in between might be.
Beth, I see you, yes?
Is there anything about the rate at which the billboards change? Because with digital billboards, there can be a really great variability in how fast you change from one message to another.
Mhm.
I was wondering if that was folded in there somewhere in the garbled part that I missed.
Yes, thank you, Beth. That's a great question. As a matter of fact, that's one of the first questions that you get asked whenever a new billboard comes into town. So it's 10 seconds. An image must remain for at least 10 seconds.
And if the billboard is intended to have movement in it, does that just mean it moves slowly, or are those not
No,
allowed?
we were very specific about the changing of the image. The image cannot flash, it cannot oscillate, it has to change statically. So it's not going to, say, move across the screen like a window shade. It's not going to move horizontally or vertically. It's just going to appear and disappear and reappear. Very simple.
And was there a reason behind the 10 seconds being picked? I mean, is that some industry standard?
The 10 seconds? Yeah, the 10 seconds is consistent with what Mass DOT permits.
Any other questions before we wrap this up? Okay, Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. Mark, thank you, sir. Enjoy the warm weather.
I'm gonna hang on in case you have questions on the town plan and reporting. I think we were asked to talk about that as well, right?
The proposed reporting change.
Yes, I asked if they could comment on that. It's, moving the town planner from reporting, as I understand it, reporting to the from the planning board to the town administration, that ultimately the town manager. And I wanted to see if you guys had a position on that, if that's appropriate to ask.
Mark?
Yeah, so I don't know how much you've studied this or if you were even ready to talk about this tonight, but we were approached by the select board to basically bring the town planner into the community development department. Currently, the town planner reports directly to the planning board. Change would basically mimic the finance department structure where the town planner would report to town manager and be under supervision of the community development director. There's some advantages to it. One being that the chair of the planning board would not have to sign pay sheets and monitor attendance and other administrative duties that I think are somewhat beyond a citizen volunteer. But more importantly, the way it's structured now, the community development, the town planner is really kind of as high as that person can go. So the way it's written, you can't have a town planner be promoted to community development director because the community development director has to report to town manager. So unless we grew the department to the point where we had a whole community, develop a whole separate position, in the interim, the community development director has to serve two roles, either one of four roles, really. They also have to be building commissioner, which we have now. They could be the economic development director, they could be the conservation director, and this would allow them to also be the town planner. So as we contemplate Jim's retirement, which is really not too soon, but it would set some expectations for a new hire as to what they could expect coming into a new job. I think it would give the planning, it really doesn't, in my eyes, affect the authority of the planning board. And it still gives us concurrence with hiring and firing so that, the town planner, the planning board would be consulted in both cases. So I don't know what else I didn't really expect to have to summarize it. I thought that was, I think Christie can do it better than I can, to be honest.
In fact, I was just going to ask, Christie, do you have anything to add, or?
Yeah, I would just add that this is also consistent with what you see across the state. I think cities and towns historically, even Westborough, as recently as 2017, the majority of department heads were reporting to boards and committees. In 2017, the charter changed significantly in terms of reporting. Town planner wasn't one of those that was done at the time, but when we surveyed other communities in Massachusetts, it's consistently the town planner reporting to the town manager or a community development director or some sort of equivalent, as opposed to reporting to a board. I think the way that Mark described some of the issues with reporting to a board, are real issues. And, as I've said before, we don't have an issue right now. We have Jim and things go really well and we all work really well with Jim. But, in the future, that might not be the case, and that's much more difficult to deal with than someone reporting directly to a board. That's not the only reason to do it, but it's one of them.
Yeah, I spoke directly to three town planners, one who reports to a mayor, one who reports to a town manager, and one who reports to a land use coordinator, which I envision as being similar to a community development director. And all three said that they thought this was a beneficial change, that if, they were actually uncomfortable with the idea of reporting directly to the planning board for political reasons, and felt that this took some of the political pressures out of the position and let them focus on, doing their duties as a planner.
Any questions, comments? Walter?
Question, so there are 3 articles, 27, 28, 29, that do this. What happens, is it possible one passes, 2 don't? I mean, that's my real question. It's not handled as one vote, it's 3 votes.
Right, so it's possible, I'm just trying to scroll to it right now. The first 2 articles are charter changes, and that's specific to the town planner's, appointments. And so that would put the town planner's appointing authority as the town manager with concurrence of the planning board. The 3rd article is a bylaw change. That would, if that didn't pass and the 2 charter changes did, the town planner's appointment authority would be under the town manager, so they would report directly to the town manager, but then they would not become part of the community development department under the bylaw. I'm just looking at these. Yeah, the second one is really just a cleanup of the charter. That's section 5.3 that says, that would really make the town planner part of the management team under the town manager. I think it's probably, my expectation is that if one doesn't pass, it would probably be that 3rd one, and then the other 2 would just create that appointing authority, or none of them would pass. So I think what I'm saying is, if you're in favor of the first one, you would be in favor of the second one. I know there's probably some more discussion to be had around the 3rd one.
Anyone else?
I had another question for the experts,
Okay.
and that on the CPA, the Community Preservation Act, I don't want, because we're going to have a presentation on that, and we've already seen one. I don't need you to explain it, but is it possible you could just tell us whether you support it or not? I assume you do.
The planning board voted to support it unanimously.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your joining us this evening.
Can I ask
Quite
one more
welcome.
CPA question?
You have another question, Beth?
The CPA one, because there were 2 things I noticed. I mean, we're asking for the minimum amount, but it's an add-on to the tax, which I found some people in a different town who may or may not have supported it when it was presented to them, but had no idea that it was being added onto their tax load rather than being taken out of what they were already being taxed. So when their first tax bills came around, on social media sites, they were like, they're stealing our money. I mean, there was just a lot of really negative feedback when the tax bills came out.
So Beth, Jen Doherty will be in Monday to your next meeting to give you a presentation, but I'll certainly
Perfect.
pass on that we need to emphasize that it's a surcharge, it's not included in.
Right.
Actually, I think she's way better at presenting it than I am, so I'm gonna let her.
No
do it.
problem. I just thought that that's super important, and I guess because somebody had said that the CPA presentation would be up tonight because you guys were here, I'm happy to wait till Monday for this type of question, but it was definitely a case of, making sure we present to the town what it really means, instead of just that it's wonderful, but
Yeah.
without the details of it does add.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you really my feeling on it, and because I won't be here Monday, is, if we had passed CPA, I mean, look at Grafton.
20 years ago.
Yeah, I think they've gotten $9 million or something like that in CPA. If we had passed CPA, we could have used that money towards some of the town hall renovations. We could have used some of that money towards some of the open space acquisitions that we've done. The open space fund might not be empty, and we might not have had to borrow so much for town hall. So to me, it's almost like saving for a rainy day or for the next project. And the bonus is we get money from the state.
The matching fees.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me that I could save and get a 40% return in a savings account, I'd probably jump into that account pretty quick. But, I can't, that's really quickly my.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I was amazed at how much negative feedback came out with the tax bills.
I think
Right.
it's I mean, I agree with you, Beth, that people need to understand, but, there should be no expectation that $40 is already in your tax bill. I mean, your tax bill is what we need to levy to provide all the services that we currently do. So it doesn't even really make sense that there would, $40 of it would now become.
I understand, but I'm gonna tell you that, the average person who really doesn't pay attention and just sees their tax bill,
Right. Just
You
thinks
don't-
it's piling on. I understand that, but you have to remember too that we looked at every possible way for somebody to get an exemption, whether it be low income or seniors or,
right,
I
and you
forget what the
also
other
picked
exemptions
very
are.
low starting bar. You picked the 0.5%.
We picked, when I say we recommended a
Yeah.
low bar, and we also recommended that the first $1,000 be exempted. So it was really we tried to minimize the burden, but still get some benefits from this program, which I think the
Okay.
town.
Beth, it's impossible to communicate with people who don't listen. If our citizens don't want to listen, they're not going to hear. We can only communicate with those who want to hear. And I think, there's been so many public hearings, so many presentations of how how this act works. The only people who won't understand are the ones who have chosen not to hear.
Yeah, further, it's got to go through an election in November too, not
Right.
just town meetings. So
Right.
there's plenty more
Yeah.
time to
And-
debate.
Okay.
And we have plenty more time to talk about it on Monday. We have other guests waiting. So, thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, moving on. We are turning our attention to Article 11, and we have two guests. Christy Williams will present the article, and Guido Leonardo, how could I mess that up as an Italian? Guido will be speaking in support of the article. Guido is the vice chair of the Council on Aging. You're on, Christy.
Thanks. This is the senior needs assessment article. As you all know, that was an initiative that came out of the 2018 strategic plan. It's also, it was something that we thought we would put on the town meeting warrant a couple of years ago, but given, COVID, it wasn't the right time because this is a really highly community engagement type process. And so we feel like, where we're at with COVID, this is the right time for us to put it on the warrant. The select board had originally had a goal also of updating the 2018 strategic plan and decided to pull that off the warrant in favor of this article, understanding that there would be similar questions being asked and similar requests of residents to get involved. And so we wanted to really be able to focus on the senior needs assessment. I had sent to Mike, and so I think to all of you, the Weston senior needs assessment that was done in 2019, just to give you an idea of what the outcome would be of this process. But there's focus groups and surveys where we'd be working with residents focused on over 55. Majority of cities and towns in Massachusetts work with UMass Boston to get these complete. And so Alma and I had actually met a couple of years ago with a representative from UMass Boston. They're the ones who did the Weston study, so I think that would be a really good example of what we might find. But I think it's really informative in terms of what that population is looking for, how people are aging in Westborough, what programs and what the physical needs are in terms of the senior center. I think we've talked about how this assessment will also give input to a future community center, which is another initiative of this strategic plan. And it also really supports goals of the master plan. As you look through the master plan, there's a lot of goals and recommendations around expanding programming, looking at the size of the senior center and really meeting those needs. And so this is really a way for us to sort of begin that process and identify needs for seniors, and identify, you know, the needs of all folks that are aging in Westborough. So, you know, we don't see this as something that is just a project for the Council on Aging or the Senior Center. We see this as a cross-departmental leadership team that will really be focused on this over the months following town meeting if it gets approved. So that would include the public health, public safety departments, recreation, library, youth and family services, and we really see this as sort of as a town-wide project. We're really reaching out in order to cast a wide net and get really good feedback so that that can inform how, you know, departments function moving forward in a way that really serves that population of our community.
Okay, before we go to questions, I'd like to invite Mr. Leonardo to stand in support of the article. Please speak into the microphone, Guido.
Thank you very much. Guido Leonardo, Vice Chair of the Council on Aging.
And your address?
189 Ruggles Street.
Thank you.
I just want to add that, you know, we at the Council on Aging have been, you know, wanting to do some expansion of the activities of the senior center, but we can't because the facilities there is just too small. It's a building that opened 30 years ago, 32 actually, and it was designed and intended for a 20-year lifespan. So we've definitely outlived the, you know, the intended life of the building, and it needs an expansion. And this assessment is what we need to get that ball rolling. Now, maybe there may be other things, as Christy mentioned, the community building or something. There are people that I've spoken to that have very strong feelings on both sides of that, and having a detailed, you know, assessment conversation with the people through focus groups and surveys, I think is an important thing to do to get this, again, get this ball rolling. The council did discuss this, and we voted unanimously to support it.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Paul? Oh, Paul, then Andrew, and then Hank.
Okay, thanks. I only looked at the Weston study briefly and some of the other, and so this may be totally out of it. But does this study, or the intention of this, do we assume that seniors, I guess my first question would be to seniors, including myself now, would be, you know, will you be staying in town because of taxes going up and everything? Are they looking for alternatives? It seems like that should be one of the early considerations. Is that true? Is that the case?
Yeah, so, I mean, if you look at the Weston study, it does talk about, you know, the number one concern of the seniors in Weston, which I would anticipate are similar to Westborough in this case, is being able to stay in the community and the size of the tax bill and the ability to pay for that. So there's some recommendations in there around exemptions, around ways to advertise out exemptions. I think in Westborough we might get some more specific recommendations because we have that senior taxation aid committee that's looking at different things that we might at some point put in front of town meeting to petition the legislature for. But yeah, it's certainly not specific to sort of programs at the senior center. It's much wider.
Thank you. And right, yeah. And my other quick question is, I sort of thought I looked through Westborough, the conclusions very quickly, and I thought Weston, the conclusions very quickly, and I thought these all apply to us. So is it necessary to have it tailored just to our community, or would this kind of information from, you know, that's more collective be just as applicable?
Yeah, I mean, I found similar, you know, things around some of the conclusions. I think, you know, I think we'll hear some of the same concerns, but I think in terms of the level of priority of each of these could be different in Westborough. They did have a few recommendations that were specific in terms of sort of where can they advertise better. One of the things that they talked about was the need for seniors to have access and comfort with contractors in town in order to make their homes, accessible for them. And in Weston, it sounds like they have a list of contractors. In Westborough, we have a handyman position. So I do think there's nuances that we need to make sure that we're looking at, and I also think that we need to make sure that specifically our seniors have a voice in what this assessment recommends, because ultimately, like all of the other, plans that we put forward, we'll be acting on it, when we get it completed, so.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Thank you. Do we know if there's any sense of kind of what boundaries that this sort of research will take? Because needs of seniors can be such a comprehensive scope of possibilities. So is this going to be focused on, policy, infrastructure, recreation opportunities, town engagement, or is this really open-ended in terms of what we're going for?
It's really asking the senior population, what are their concerns, what are their priorities. I would equate it similar to the strategic plan, in that it's as open-ended as we want it to be, because what we want is people's thoughts and goals for the community, and so we don't want to sort of narrow it too much that we're directing those outcomes. But if you look at the Weston study, and I know you just got it yesterday, but it speaks to programs and recreation opportunities, but it also speaks to how do seniors age in place, and then transportation issues related to seniors. So it really, I think, runs sort of the gamut of needs related to town services and how towns can support the needs of seniors.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback, and I understand the need to have an open-endedness to it, but as I say, my concern is it is such a sweeping question that you think about the life of a person, it's literally the senior needs their entire life. If you don't have areas you make sure you can visit and discuss, it's possible that interests and priorities that may be very easily achievable will be overlooked because we're really focusing on the three biggest things that pump from the survey. So just a suggestion that we make sure that we frame, and I'm sure the folks will have enough experience in this, but that we frame it with things in areas that we think we may be able to address as well. So thank you, though.
I mean, it's certainly not one question. It's not just what are you looking for, as you age in Westborough.
I got that. Thank you.
But I think if you look back to the strategic plan and also the master plan in terms of questions that were asked and levels of engagement there, I would expect a similar process here.
Hank?
Yeah, I mean, I fully support doing the study and such, and my concerns are more about implementation and how it rolls out than about the study itself. The town's in desperate need of this kind of a study. Is there a plan for who or what positionally within the town structure, who's going to be managing and supervising the work activity, and how they're going to go about it, and any feel for when we could expect to see a final report?
I don't know. I'm thinking that I looked back at the Weston study. I want to say it was like a 6-month process that they were projecting. So if it's approved, there's no reason we couldn't start immediately. I would actually encourage us to go out, to get started immediately, because I think given sort of the cycle of COVID, we would want to be doing this work in the spring and summer, sort of in fear of what, can happen in late fall, winter. So, I think it's a 6-month, but I don't want to, I'm not sure exactly how long that would be. But, in terms of implementation, I think depending on what the recommendations are, I would expect that the Council on Aging would take on a lot of the recommendations. But, some of them are gonna require, work from other departments. So, there's one recommendation in the Weston study that's kind of specific around things that I would see in Westborough as being sort of things that the Recreation Department does. And so I think we're gonna have to see what those recommendations are and probably share that load.
Melanie?
With regard to the focus groups and the surveys, do they do them with cross-cultural things in mind, bilingual? How are we addressing the whole populace, I guess?
Yeah, great question. So we obviously haven't contracted with them yet, so I don't have a specific answer. However, we expect that we have thought about that in terms of the price, of the cost that we've put in the warrant article. We've actually given a few $1,000s more than what Weston paid in anticipation of wanting to be able to have materials that are in multiple languages, and also to be able to do outreach maybe above what has been done in other communities.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Oh,
just-
Paul?
My career has been market research, and I noticed in the Weston study that I believe they did a mailing to all seniors that they were able to track through their census. In the past, our surveys have been on the website. Anybody wants to go on there, that'd be great. We get, 10 or 20 responses. So I would not like us to think that we're relying on a survey like that again, that we would do a lot of outreach and try to get a, good participation rate. Is that also thinking?
I totally agree. That's why COVID, if it was going to be all done online, COVID wouldn't have been as big of an obstacle for this work. But it definitely has to give, there will certainly be some online interaction for people who choose that method. But there needs to be, I totally agree, there needs to be a lot of in-person engagement, whether it's survey, focus group.
Well, online is fine. It's just that we need to bring in people to do this survey that aren't just volunteers who happen to hear about it.
Right, we need both.
Small numbers.
Yeah.
But online is more efficient. That's fine. It could be emails out to, if we get emails to all seniors, a few, once, at least twice, and then hopefully get at least a 10% response rate type of thing, as opposed to, again, just total volunteers.
Yeah.
Paul, I think that if we're gonna pay $50,000, that they're gonna use a milieu of procedures and processes to gather as much information as they can. So, but it's good. You can kind of look over their shoulders with your background. Hank?
Yeah, it's more a comment than a question. Folks may or may not be aware, there's somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 people in Westborough who are in the age group that qualify as senior citizens. In fact, there's probably more people who qualify as senior citizens than people who are of school age in the community. So that, when we think about the senior population, we're not talking about a trivial number of people. We're talking about a very substantial number of people. And then kind of to reinforce Melanie's concern, again, the census statistics indicate that somewhere in the neighborhood of 25–28% of our total population in town identifies as being a part of some underrepresented minority. But it's probably statistically correct to say that means that probably in the neighborhood of somewhere between 20 and 30% of the senior citizens are also underrepresented minorities. Many of those being many of our school students, particularly in the early grades, are English language learners. That probably means there is a substantial number of senior citizens in our community for whom English is not their native language, not their primary language. So being really sensitive to both the size of the population and how we access them and work with them, interact with them. It's really gonna be critical in getting an effective survey. You know, we're really talking about a very large population.
Hank, sorry, Walter?
Yeah, Christie, I thought that Weston report was actually quite impressive, and because it kept going on and on and on. It was like, wow, they took a lot of information. Is part of this, maybe it's a statement, not a question, but I think it seems like part of this is by doing this, you're engaging citizens into the process by asking the questions. It isn't just the gathering of data, I think, that has value.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that, you know, there's a whole population that uses the senior center, and then there's others, folks that don't. And, you know, and maybe there are folks that are feeling like if they don't have kids in school anymore, the town isn't sort of offering them the level of service that they maybe had previously gotten or that others are getting. So we certainly want to engage at the front end to learn about, you know, what folks are looking for, but then continue that engagement so that once we, you know, so that as we are providing these things and implementing, that they continue to be engaged with the town.
Anybody else? Okay. Christie, Guido, thank you so much for coming this evening. And thank you for your patience while we went through the zoning articles. I'm sure you enjoyed it? Oh, okay.
Very entertaining.
Yeah.
We're gonna start recruiting you for this committee if you like that.
Like zoning, like any of
Walter, can the notes show that I will not get a survey?
Everybody else at this
Everybody else on
front
the
table
panel
is
might,
gonna get
that's
a
right.
survey,
Yeah.
except for Melanie.
Melanie and Beth won't get surveys. Okay, Christie, thank you very much. And is there anything you want to add to this committee, Christie, before?
I don't have anything else, but if you have any questions, I guess I would just say that we did do another presentation of the budget. Amber and I actually did it at the senior center last Friday, the 18th. That's on Westborough TV. It's been shared on social media. You know, I don't think it's anything that you haven't heard before, but you know, it does give the new number schools decrease in their budgets that I know was presented to you, I think, last week. So it's that. So we're looking at the use of free cash as recommended. It's at $1,087.
Thank you. Okay, have a good evening.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night, Guido.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. We skipped over the minutes deliberately so that we could have our guests make their presentations. So let's turn our attention to the minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve or not. The minutes of January 27th with the Select Board, which was the Budget Summit, the retreat with the school committee on February 9th, and our own meeting of last week, February 17th. So may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the Budget Summit with the Select Board on January 27th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Bradley,
Second.
second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to a vote. Beth? Beth?
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on. Blumberg, yes?
Board, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Mr. Dolan is not with us this evening.
Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Roush, yes.
Zeke, yes.
Moretti, yes.
It's 8. Oh.
Okay, the next set of minutes is the meeting, meeting number 22 with the school committee, the joint retreat with the school committee. May I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second?
Board second.
Bradley.
Z second. Any discussion on these?
Blumberg abstain.
No discussion, we'll move to a vote. Beth?
Blumberg abstain.
Okay.
Board, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Eagle abstain.
Leslie, yes.
Roush, yes.
Moretti, yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
And two abstentions.
6, 0, 2.
Okay, moving
And,
on. I'm sorry?
And we're gonna wait for the school board before we final.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're waiting to hear from the school board on their vote on the, on those minutes before we publish, before we post.
That's the one I thought we just voted on, okay.
Yeah. The next set of minutes is our meeting of last week, February 17th. May I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second?
Bradley, second.
Beth?
Blumberg, yes.
Board abstain.
Bradley, yes.
Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Roush, yes.
Abstain.
Moretti, yes.
Also 602.
602. Okay, the next item is the subject of the R&R. I had put two potential topics in my email, and today Walter suggested another topic that we might consider, which is looking at some of the positive things that are coming out of some of these articles with respect to strategic plan, master plan, et cetera. For example, like the Council on Aging issue. Any other thoughts about topics? Because, you know, what I'm gonna do is what I did for the last two meetings. I'll do a draft and circulate it for your edits and/or additional recommendations. Any other suggestions?
Mike, I mean, one of the things I think we ought to try to find a way to communicate is the portion of the increase in the average single-family tax that's associated with increases in spending by the community, because that's the controllable variable, and try to take the focus off of the increase in taxes that's coming about because of the possibility of a tax burden shifting due to assessed valuation changes. I'm not, that's not easy, it's a fairly complex concept. At one level, it's really simple. I mean, for me, hey, this is really simple, but to try and understand how to communicate that without using the numbers in detail and without going through a detailed analysis with people, if we can figure out how to do that, we really need to do that.
Yeah, I think you had sent me a memo about that a few weeks ago.
Somewhere
Yeah,
along the line,
I've got it.
I mean, I did some
Yeah.
work with the numbers and such, and you can kind of sort it out.
Yeah.
But, you know,
I'll give it a try, and you could,
people got, we've got to try and find a way to get the town meeting audience, the town citizens to focus on what they can control. Certainly, it's okay to be angry about what you can't control, but it's not a particularly good use of your time.
or your emotions.
Mike,
Yes, Paul?
this, I don't know whether this is supportive of that concept or in conflict, but if I were writing something, I'd also want to say, I'd also like to recommend that, you know, the dual tax rate be studied seriously before before it's next set. And even though the town meeting won't have anything to do with that, if we don't encourage it, who's going to? I don't know.
But again, that's totally outside of our scope.
Well, I don't know about that, Hank. I understand what you said about tying spending,
Yeah.
right, to kind of tax increases
The
to
decision
spending.
about tax burdens by class of real estate is governed by two things. It's governed by state statute.
Yep.
And it's governed by the Board of Selectmen. Now, as individual citizens, we all have a right to petition, go to the Board of Selectmen, ask them to please undertake a study. But as a finance committee, it's not within our purview. It's not part of our charter.
Well, it may not be, in my,
We're basically saying the finance committee is gonna publicly provide advice to the Board of Selectmen as to how they should do their job. I have no problem with doing that privately, but I got a real problem with doing it publicly.
well, I'm not suggesting that that's what our intent is, but, you know, in my opinion, we represent the taxpayers of Westborough. And that question of dual taxation has come up many times over the years. And I can't remember when the last time a study was done. I know that there was some movement by Jim Malloy, and he did a presentation several years ago, which addressed that issue either directly or obliquely. And you know, my opinion is that I think that we need to have this conversation. And whether we label it a study or we bring in the people that have a hand in the taxation and have a conversation with them about what drives this kind of decision-making.
The Board of Selectmen holds a hearing every year. By statute, they are required to hold a hearing every year. It's a public meeting, an open meeting. It occurs in the fall. And, you know, it'd be quite appropriate for the finance committee to request time to participate in that hearing.
But if we
To bring it
don't
up as a
ahead of
subject
time
at town meeting.
prepare by learning
Yeah, I
about
mean,
it,
again.
we can't.
Privately, can we have conversations and say, gee, select board, this is a really hot issue and we'd like to work with you to see if we couldn't find a way of assisting you in reviewing this? So, yeah, absolutely, but to make it a subject of our advice package to the town meeting, it's not appropriate at this point.
It certainly wouldn't be appropriate to say that we should do it, but to say that we
Right.
should look into it is different.
Again, the town meeting has absolutely nothing to do with, I mean, it's gonna happen by statute. Every year it happens, it has happened every year for the last 20 years.
But what about the uninformed, you know, resident?
I
Who
can't
doesn't
help
even-
people who don't wanna be informed.
I know, but this is an opportunity. This is something that's written up that they have the ability to read, and they say, oh, look at this, maybe this is an idea.
I mean, if you wanna try, I'm gonna vote against it.
Okay.
All right,
Totally
you know
opposed
what,
to it.
let me draft the R&R as I said I would, and let's review the language, because I think we ought to advise the town meeting that this is what your finance committee is looking at, and perhaps we do intend to sit in front of the select board and say, hey, look, folks, we've informed ourselves about this, and we have an opinion that we'd like to share with you before you vote on the next tax rates.
They don't vote on the tax rates.
Well,
They vote on the spending.
the
They
spending,
vote on the budget.
fine.
You've
They
gotta be
vote on the
really
budget.
careful, because people think they're voting on the tax rate. They're not voting on the tax rate. They're voting on the spending. That's what they have control over.
Okay, well, I
They
think that,
don't have anything to do with voting on, they can't vote on the revenue side of the equation.
okay, great, I get it, but it's still
They're the
not, we are,
The residents are the generators of the revenue.
No, but they don't vote on how
Well, I
much,
know
what the
that.
revenue's gonna be. They vote
I
on what the
get that,
spending's
I
gonna be.
get that, but I'm just saying,
And
if you if you dial it down, it's money out of our pockets.
Yes, but
So-
the spending is money out of our pocket.
Exactly.
And,
And
but
I agree with you. We
If
do
you start
need
telling
to
them
get
they
it,
can vote
rein
on
it
the
in.
tax rate, you're gonna get them confused, because they can't and they don't. They vote on the spending, they gotta focus on the spending. We have a hard enough time getting folks to focus on the spending.
well, maybe part of what we put out there makes that point,
That's fine.
just to clarify
that's
what people may be thinking.
I think it helps me to accept the spending increase if I realize that the structural issue that that I certainly do have an opinion on, and I vote for selectmen, and I can let them know, but I don't know why it would need to be kept, quiet from us, but I actually think it makes me more likely to vote for this budget if I know that that problem is going to be looked at least.
Okay. Any other topics that we want to get into the R&R? Andrew?
Nope, I'm fine with where we are.
Okay. All right, thank you. Moving on. Any liaison reports?
Yes, Mike, just the snow and ice. Again, there is an article in the warrant to replenish the reserve fund, and I believe the intent is to make sure we have money to cover the snow and ice. We won't make a final decision on what the number is or whether or not to support it until town meeting floor, but I think we need to be prepared before we get to town meeting floor to present why we're taking the position we're taking and what we believe the likely expenditures will be that the money goes for, so people understand. Just
Yeah.
the other piece of that, the last 2 times that we overspent or deficit spent the snow and ice was in fiscal 2015 and fiscal 2017. We've not had an overspending since those years.
But we've got one now.
We don't, well,
She's,
Project.
the latest
she's-
report I
she's-
saw.
No, there's not a net deficit in the total amount. There's a deficit in the expenses.
Correct.
And she's predicting that there will be a deficit overall, but that in the past, we've been able to cover with our reserve funds.
Yep.
So we really need to be prepared to explain why, in this tough time, we're asking people to replenish a reserve fund that we rarely, if ever, spend entirely. Get it?
The last time we spent, we came to a point where we were going to go into a deficit with the reserve fund was about 3 years ago when we bought the new roof over at DPW. That was $160,000. So, hang on, Beth, I'll get to you. I saw some more just a brief comment from the financial administrator over at DPW that in addition to the 100,000 request that was approved for deficit spending, there may be another request coming in. And more than likely related to wages and salaries as opposed to, expenses, but that's a possibility. Who knew? I didn't realize it until I looked at it not long ago. Treated salt is $85 a ton and untreated salt is $62 a ton. And we've had a couple of 2-day storms in this year where we were paying $30,000 just, in expenses. And so it's
Oh, yeah.
expensive.
Our spending this year has been unusual, not
Yep.
because of an unusual snow, but because of expenses going
Yeah.
much higher than what we had
Plus,
planned.
plus we have this inflation.
At the same time, we're planning flat snow and ice spending for next year. And if we really think we're gonna blow this year's snow and ice by a couple $100,000, we really ought to question whether we're being prudent in planning flat spending.
Agreed. Walter?
Well, I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, I'm
Beth
sorry,
was
Beth.
next.
I forgot you had your hand up. Sorry.
No problem, thank you. So a couple of years ago, we were getting sort of monthly, or we were getting updates on the snow and ice status. And I haven't seen a numerical update. Have I been missing them?
They've only been circulated to Hank, who's the DPW liaison. I get a copy, and that's it. I don't recall,
Okay,
if
so
you want to
is it-
see them, I'm happy to send them out to you.
I'm gonna say based on past years, it was sort of pleasant to see them so that it doesn't seem like a shock when it comes up for additional spending or other. But that used to be a practice, was it did get out to the rest of us.
Yeah, okay. Technically, we don't have to approve deficit spending for snow and ice. The town
No, but-
manager can make that decision.
No, but in terms of, it was helpful to see it,
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
so that when the request comes for a budget transfer, our minds can wrap around it, because what happens is that, at the closer that I see the money to the snow that I just saw, the better I can say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Versus at the end of the season, I'm like, and how many snowstorms and how big? And, it's a harder number to get my head around.
If everybody is comfortable with looking at more numbers, I'm happy to send them out.
Thank you.
Just gotta
Okay.
say, at the end of the season, it's too late to the money's
Right.
spent.
The
so
money's
you-
spent.
The cat left
Yeah,
the barn.
does everybody understand, let's just make sure we have a complete understanding of this. If we don't cover the deficit, right, that deficit goes into next year's tax bill. It's an add-on to the tax bill, right?
Which is
So-
why we've always covered it.
Pardon me?
Which is why, at least since I've been on this board, we've always covered it.
And we want to make sure we can continue to cover it.
We're not allowed to deficit spend ourselves.
We are not, no,
No.
we are not.
That's-
But the other issue is, we talked a little bit, and Andrew, I see your hands up, hang on one sec. We talked a little bit about the optics of doing this article, asking for that additional money. And I also thought about, well, what about the optics of, one, having to call a special town meeting because we didn't make a simple transfer from free cash to the reserve fund, which at the end of the fiscal year goes back to free cash if there's any balance. So that's a paper transaction. And how would, doing that and then calling a special town meeting to ask for more money because we didn't make that special transaction, or how would it look if we blew it all together and in fiscal '24, it's sitting on the tax bill? So optics are optics, and there's different lenses to look at things. Yeah, Walter.
So-
Hang on a minute, Andrew's got his,
Actually, Walter was going to go before I was, so
All
I'm
right.
happy to let him
my
talk first.
apologies. Go ahead, Walter.
So to me, if the only point is snow and ice, then there's no need to replenish the amount. I think, in my mind, the point is there is gonna be snow and ice, but there are also unexpected things that can happen between now and June 30th that would require funding.
And
So I don't expect snow and ice to use all $250,000 of this.
from your mouth to God's ears, as they say. Beth?
That's a long
Andrew.
way.
Andrew?
Thank you. And I think you were starting to get to this point, but I think that there's a trail I don't quite understand, and that is the devil's advocate position about let's just not cover snow and ice with what we do. You said it ends up on the tax bill, but does it not just get paid out of free cash, which is what we get paid out of anyways?
No, sir.
It goes straight to the levy. By statute, it goes straight to the levy. Nobody gets a vote. There's no intervention. Nobody has any, by statute, it goes to the levy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Probably to discourage deficit spending.
Right.
Yeah, I think that may be why they did it that way, but,
Beth,
Muted.
you're muted.
Sorry, I was mute. No, I was gonna say that I thought that the problem is we don't have our full finance reserve fund because we've already used a huge chunk. And so I feel like, and this is the reason why I asked about, numerically, where is snow and ice? Because I know I have a storm that I'm expecting tomorrow that they're probably out there working their tails off now to sand and salt so it's safe enough tomorrow. I just kind of want to have an idea, like, where, so that I feel better about advocating for what the right number is to add to the reserve fund, so that we actually have a genuine reserve fund that can pay that deficit, but plus the other oopses that come at the very last minute at the end of the year. Because I agree that a special town meeting to ask for that money would just be stupid. It would be a
Beth,
waste of money on our part.
The plan is that we will work with the DPW right on up until just before town meeting to get a real-time understanding of how much deficit spending we've done. We will also
Yes.
work with the town manager to get forecasts of anything that they know that's in the bushes that might come forward as a need for a reserve fund transfer. We'll take that best available intelligence, and we'll combine it together with some judgment, and we'll come up with a number that we need to replenish the reserve fund. It may be $87,000 that's in the warrant, it may be more, and it may be less. We have the opportunity, by way of motion on the town meeting floor, to make that adjustment. Seems to me like a prudent thing to do is to invest invest the extra energy in going through a process that we use the best available intelligence before we go to town meeting floor.
But right now, you're one of the only people with that intelligence, because it used to be shared with the entire committee, and right now you and Mike are sitting on it. That's the information I'm asking for.
Beth, first of all, that wasn't intentional,
I understand.
so I will send it out, and you will have a chance to look at the gory details.
You see
That is
you see
exactly the
sheets.
request, thank you.
Okay.
It's not that the information's there, it's like it's really hard to have a good perspective, and if you can see it growing, I just feel it's much easier to understand when you get to the last minute and you just see this one lump at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on, so we could all get some decent sleep tonight. The last thing is future draft agendas. I sent out late today, I apologize, an updated meeting calendar, and that was because up until I sent that out, we were getting last-minute requests. And even after I sent it out, I got a request from Assabet to appear, Assabet Valley School folks to appear in front of our committee. And I've suggested to them that March 3rd or March 7th we would be available. So I anticipate getting back to them tomorrow to confirm that. Monday is going to be a very busy day. We've got potentially 4 citizens petitions, plus the community development folks. So please anticipate that we may be here longer. Depending on where we are, if we don't bring in the Assabet folks on the 3rd, Walter and I had a conversation this afternoon. We think we ought to start voting and not wait until the 10th, which is showing on the calendar to do that. So we could take a chunk on the 3rd and another chunk on the 7th, and then if necessary on the 10th.
It would seem to me on the 3rd, there's a lot of articles that are just plain old routine.
Right,
and
just
there's
bang them
no
right
question.
out.
So
Now the warrant's closed, so we
so
know
we
they're
could
not
just-
moving
I mean,
around.
What's been done in the past and worked is we just start going through the warrant, Article 1. Anybody object to voting? Yes, okay, we'll put that aside. Article 2, anybody object? No, good, vote on it. So you just go through the whole darn warrant, and what you'll do is you'll end up voting 20 of them in about 45 minutes.
Well, you know who's gonna get a chance to do that? Walter is gonna run that meeting because I will be in a remote posture, and it makes sense logistically for Walter to do that. So we could, you've got your marching orders.
It's a simple way to
That's
do
what
it.
we did last time.
Easy enough.
Yeah.
We do the same
The
thing
other,
at
the
Civic
other thing you
Club.
might do is somebody might go back and look at last year or the year before's minutes, where we voted the warrant, how we phrased
Yeah,
the motions.
the problem, yes, the problem was
Remember that.
with last year, having written the minutes, was you have to make a motion to basically suggest the town votes the article as written in the warrant, but we also like mentioning the amount and the source.
Right.
So people who want to make the motion, yes, I can pull out the minutes from last time, but they ought to think about that ahead of making
Maybe even
motions.
just, if you wanna just create a quick template and send it to people.
Okay.
Just speeds things up. I remember
Yeah.
going through this, it just speeds things up then.
Depending on what day our guests are at, well, the meeting of the 7th has to be remote because we've surrendered the first Monday of every month to Zoning Board of Appeals, I believe, in this room. So,
Mike?
yeah, Paul.
I just wanted to reinforce that, you know, and I don't know whether you saw the email that I sent to you today, but I don't think we want to have the votes all on at all on the 10th, because it doesn't give, if someone cannot make the 10th, whether it's known in advance or an emergency, they won't have a chance to vote or re-vote on any, you know, say one controversial article that they really wanted to.
Yeah,
do so.
that's
One article
that's
that was-
why Walter and I had that conversation, because I was, you know, it kind of triggered my thinking. Your email triggered my thinking on that,
Okay, I just
Or
wanted to
if
add
for
that
any
was a-
reason we couldn't
Okay.
actually meet on the 10th.
on the 10th, yeah.
the-
Snowstorm.
It made
We have
more
no
sense,
salt.
Paul, as you suggested, to start going probably on the 3rd and 7th, and then,
Yeah.
if anything, leave some stragglers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second,
Board, second.
Beth? Or she mouthed Blumberg, yes.
Board, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Roush, yes?
Yes.
Put out the door.
Ready, yes. Thank you.
Even
We are
sit here this
adjourned.
long.